The long night, the build-up to the final event. A fleet is being assembled, the Vorlons are still on the move, the Shadows are even now striking back, wiping out all life on a colony world that supported the Vorlons. Now, they don't have any kind of Death Star array here. There's some kind of killer cloud surrounding the place or something. There's some real dark voodoo shit going on here. But what we should note is that what the Vorlons and the Shadows are doing are attacking each other's support networks, but not each other. It calls to mind the Sith Inquisitor challenge, where the goal isn't direct contact, but rather to undermine the power base of the adversary. The Sith Master is being defeated, but not destroyed. Likewise, one must wonder if the goal isn't to necessarily wipe out their enemy, but rather it could be that they simply want a proxy victory by eliminating their entire power base. That's just a guess. We'll have to see how it shakes out. But before Centauri Prime becomes a casualty in that war, Londo needs to deal with the Emperor, and on the Narn homeworld, he has gathered some loyalists to discuss just that. They're quick to point out that, hey, you're kind of responsible for this whole situation, aren't you? I mean, after all, he did support Lord Rifa, who was responsible for eliminating the Prime Minister, who was their best chance of actually dealing with Cartarja. So thanks. Londo's like, well, yeah, but water under the bridge now. Point is, you've got to choose the death of Cartarja today or the destruction of your planet. And I don't know about any of you, but I just had the bathroom remodeled, and I can't turn my back on that kind of a commitment. After the titles, Ivanova's excited about taking this big-ass fleet in a battle, but Sharon's like, hold that thought. He wants her to spend some time first using Lorienne's help to find more of the first ones. Well, she is not a fan of this plan. She doesn't want to miss out on the big party. She explains that her mother watched her playing right before she went off to take her own life. One last perfect memory before dying, see? But that explains why Ivanova doesn't want to be kept out of this fight. She doesn't want to be told once again to just wait or to come later and find out that it's all over and everyone is dead. Sometimes it sucks to be the survivor. Among other things, you got to clean up the mess. On Narn, Cartarja is having a little party to celebrate, complete with a jester. But there is good news. Cartarja likes Londo so much that he's decided to allow him to survive and be his high priest. So, that's good. We'll call that Plan B. I mean, I'm just having real trouble picturing Londo in the right getup. So he goes off to see Jakar and learns about the eye thing, and while Jakar is poetic about it, I mean, you can, of course, think about the comparison between Jakar losing this in his comments about seeing other things and that of Odin, who, of course, famously gave up his eye for knowledge. The first of which was, I really should have gotten a monocle instead of glasses. But Londo is here strictly for business. He explains that the execution is today. Not to worry, though, Londo has bribed the palace guards. Not the personal guards. They're too loyal to the Emperor to ever be bribed. But he has had Jakar's chains weakened as a result. So, Jakar will be able to break out of his chains, create a distraction, and then Londo and his people will then be able to handle the Emperor. That's important. If the Narn were to harm or kill Cartarja, well, that would be subjugation without end. Even those opposed to Cartarja and the operation would demand retribution. He may be a freaking lunatic, but damn it, he's our freaking lunatic. Case in point, the jester had made the mistake of mocking the Emperor slightly through imitation, and this is naturally the result. You can be killed if you're a fool if you wind up making fun of the Emperor or the King. You can only be locked up if it's the Queen, though. If it's the Prince, the best they can do is just slap you around. So yeah, lesson learned, never make fun of the fresh King of Bel-Air. Well, it's a good thing that Veer soon arrives with the means of ending Cartarja's reign of terror, a decorative tube that houses a needle with a trace of neurotoxin. Not very much, just enough to kill without being obvious about it. Too much poison, and even if you got it past the food tasters, you'd wind up, well, making very clear that somebody else had done the deed. It has to be delivered right in the center of the chest. Now, don't worry, it's not going to bleed out everywhere. There's a little sealant, so when you pull it out, the wound is closed. Don't want to give away the magic trick, after all. So, we have the murder weapon, the palace guard bribed, and the chains weakened. Everything should go off without a hitch.
Just to be on the safe side, I had his chains replaced by my personal guards. The others looked weak.
Shit. Shit. Why didn't I think of that so you didn't have to? Despite this, despite all that he has been through, Jakar still digs deep enough to break his chains. Londo ushers Cartagia away, but the Emperor is ranting over the insult of Jakar making a scene like that, rather than getting on with his execution via vivisection. Well, during all of that, he strikes Londo because Londo has the audacity to try to calm him down. When he does that, the needle that Cartagia didn't notice gets lost, and so, after hearing his mad ranting, Vir himself takes up the needle, puts it to Cartagia's chest, and finally deals with him for good. The timing couldn't be worse. The jester's already dead, can't liven up the funeral. After they announce that the Emperor has died, Londo points out that this is the second time in a row that an Emperor dealing with the Narn has just croaked, and we should probably take this as a sign to wash our hands of the Narn for good. The others concur. They've gotten their pound of flesh from the Narn. Well, I mean, not with the vivisection, but it doesn't really matter. No sense in throwing good money after bad here. That's their philosophy. They should get back home and deal with their own problems after all. There's no heir to the throne, and those shadow vessels remain on their homeworld to draw the ire of the Vorlons. So it suggests that Londo be made the prime minister for now. Ooh, that's nice. I mean, assuming everyone survives. As Londo says, there's going to be some blowback from freeing the Narn, but he's going to keep his word, and he can always put the head of Centauri PR on the job. Back on B5, Sheridan, Delenn, and Garibaldi are discussing the Vorlons and Shadow's behavior when a message comes in from White Star 14. The ranger in command of that ship is Erickson, played by Bryan Cranston. Now keep in mind, this episode was in 1997, so all Cranston was known for to the audience was as the dentist on Seinfeld. There's no Malcolm in the Middle, there's no Breaking Bad, there's not even that X-Files episode that we've previously looked at. It seems like a lot of prominent actors had early appearances in their career in our sci-fi shows. Makes you wonder what the future will bring, doesn't it? Is there going to be a day where we're going to look back and say, hey, did you see that one time that Miguel Lopez was on The Mandalorian? Could you imagine the award-winning actor from the Shadow Out of Time series playing some Imperial trooper? They're calling because they've been investigating those dark clouds that happen whenever the shadows are attacking a planet. It seems that inside of those clouds, they're firing missiles that pierce the crust, burrow into the core, and then detonate until the whole planet just breaks up. This is horrifying to see, but Lennier has been trying to tell them there's even worse news. Yeah, I know, even worse news than the end of the world. They can see where the Vorlons are heading next. It's the planet Coriana 6, which has 6 billion people on it. If you're wondering, in 1997, the population of Earth was approximately 6 billion people. So we would take their destructions kind of personally. Over on the Narn homeworld, Vir is having a little trouble coming to grips with what he did. It's not every day that you kill somebody, never mind the head of an entire interstellar empire. So he decides to get drunk, since it seemed to always work for Londo, he says. Londo verbally slaps him across the face with the necessity of the act, that millions of lives are going to be saved with Cartagia's death. But what sinks in for Londo is that he has pulled in someone to his world that didn't have the same lofty ambitions that he did. Vir was content with his position. He only wanted to be secure and to have a wife. He didn't hunger for power and lament its absence like Londo did. Londo admits that the reason he treated Vir as poorly as he sometimes did was envy of this innocence, and that he regrets bringing him into the situations that he has. It's a great reflection on the two characters. It's not their usual comedy double act at all. I mean, I'm not knocking that. That was a great part of the show. But it shows the depth the two of them have. Back in the B5 war room, the League have gathered so Sheridan can show them the Shadow's planet-destroying methods and to discuss the coming Vorlon attack. With them about to annihilate billions, Sheridan is forced to move up their timetable. He intends to have some of them launch a strike to buy some time while he gets his forces into position in order to have the proper attack. They won't be the only ones there. Sheridan intends to make sure that the Shadows are there as well. Force them to confront each other directly rather than picking off helpless secondary targets. But forcing the Shadows there isn't going to be simple. In fact, it's going to come at a price. And the timing of this is probably important. Because after all, if they're sending a force out there to buy time, some of those people are being sent out there to die. I mean, that's always a thing that's going to happen in war, but if it's you're buying time until we can bring more in there, odds of your survival aren't that great. But in front of them all, Sheridan contacts Erickson, telling him that he'll lead 4 additional ships in an attack against a small Shadow outpost, one that happens to be near a major staging area, so the Shadows could easily respond before they could complete their mission. But that's not a bug, it's a feature.
That file contains information about a secret base we've established near Coriana 6. Most of the fleet will be there when it goes online in 3 days.
We had a really good jester lined up for it too, but some reason his agent says he's not available.
But Erickson, if this information falls into the hands of the Shadows, they will launch an attack against that base just before it becomes operational.
Don't worry, sir. We won't let it fall into the wrong hands.
Oh, I'm afraid you don't get what the punchline is. This is a suicide mission. The Shadows have to find it seemingly against the will of the crew. JMS frequently drew on historical precedent for B5, oftentimes from World War II, and this seems likely to have been originated with Operation Mincemeat. To divert German attention during the attack on Sicily, British intelligence found a dead homeless Welsh laborer who had eaten some rat poisoning. They put the body on ice, and on the advice of Ian Fleming, the creator of James Bond, he got the idea from a detective novel he once read. They created a fake identity for this guy as a Marine major who died in a plane crash over the Mediterranean. He had all kinds of personal effects on him, personal correspondence, and also some information that hinted that the Allies were attacking at Sardinia and Greece, but not Sicily. German forces were pulled from Sicily in response, and so were easily routed when the Allies attacked, forcing the Axis to divert from the Eastern Front to try to stop the advance through Italy, leaving things easier for the Soviets to push west then. Back on Narn, with the Centauri gone, the sky is lighting up with fireworks, but inside they're having fun smashing up the replica of the throne room. Jakar's attempt to admonish them for their misplaced belief that it was strength that drove off the Centauri, and that once Jakar is healed, he can lead them in retaliation against the Centauri, follow the Centauri example. Well, he's a bit annoyed that these people don't seem to realize that the ones they're trying to imitate may very well be wiped out tomorrow because of all of these misguided notions. Well, finally, since they can't throw him on the throne like they want to, they settle for insulting him for refusing, asking, "What did you endure?" just as he heads off, laughing at them. You really have to get Narn humor. Back on B5, Sheridan listens to the final transmission of White Star 14 before it's destroyed. But it wasn't for nothing. They've taken the bait. It's the beginning of the end, and we're going to see how that goes next week in the conclusion of this arc.
All hail the Overlord! All hail the Overlord!
They always overwrap these things. You have to be a magician to open it.